Hello everyone, welcome to anyone who's new, which is all of you. Thanks for subscribing. The intro in my first video didn't quite go to plan. Hello. Yoli. My name's Claire and this is Yoli. I run a small houseplant business called The Jungle Haven, and I've started this channel to bring you weekly videos on plant care, tips and tricks, plant styling, and much more. If this sounds like something you're interested in, then make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And there's a thing about a notification bell as well, but I can't remember what that is. If you know what I'm talking about, do that too. In this week's video, I'm going to be going through 10 really useful houseplant hacks that I personally wish I'd known sooner. I hope you find them useful.
Use rainwater to water your plants.
This is something that I heard about people doing for ages and, to be honest, never really bothered to do just because it seemed like so much effort. But since I've started doing it, I've noticed plants that were almost kind of a bit dormant suddenly popping out new growth. The great thing about rainwater as opposed to tap water is that it's just got far less treatment chemicals, salts, and tap water can be really harsh on your plants, especially your more sensitive plants like caladiums, calatheas. Over time, it can cause a buildup of fluoride in the soil. Also, definitely worth saying that if you've got a water softener in your house, don't use this water to water your plants. The chemicals in water softener are really high in sodium and it can actually kill your plants, so would not recommend it. With the rainwater, I mean, it's pretty obvious. Literally just leave a bucket outside and let it collect. If you're fancy enough to have a water butt, then you don't need a bucket. You can filter it, but I personally don't, and then use this to water your plants.
Use a wet towel to increase humidity.
At this time of year when we've got the central heating on and the air in our homes tends to be a bit drier, if you don't have a humidifier or if you just want to increase the humidity in your house a little bit more, I would recommend getting a wet towel or some sort of material that holds moisture really well and hanging it over your radiators. Your house still gets nice and warm, but the moisture from the towel will evaporate into the air and your plants will really thank you for it. If you don't have a humidifier, this is just a really great cheap alternative to adding a bit more humidity to your house. Also, leaving your clothes to air dry in general in the house helps to raise the humidity.
Squeeze your pots to improve aeration.
This next one is just an alternative to what a lot of people call the chopstick method. The chopstick method is when you take a chopstick and you use it to poke holes down into the soil to basically just increase the aeration. Without good aeration in the soil, over time it will become really compressed. The roots won't be able to breathe properly and you'll be much more susceptible to things like root rot, which can be a killer. The chopstick method is really effective, but obviously when you're poking anything sharp deep down into the soil, you risk damaging your plant's roots. And especially if you've got a plant that's quite temperamental, quite sensitive, then that's the last thing you want to do. You don't want to disturb the roots. So my method, I say my method, it's just the method I use. I don't know if I made it up. I probably didn't. Take your plant in its nursery pot and before you water it, you just give it a really good squeeze just to kind of loosen up the soil as much as possible. It creates the same cavity spaces in the soil but without the risk of damaging the roots. This means that when you water, more oxygen will be pushed down into the soil.
Keep the water from pasta, rice, eggs and vegetables.
This one is so easy. Every time you've boiled eggs, boiled vegetables, boiled pasta, boiled rice, keep the water from it, let it cool down and use it to water your plants because it acts as a natural fertilizer. With water from boiled eggs, it's really great at just adding extra calcium. It's also brilliant at neutralizing the pH balance in the soil, which is particularly great for plants like African violets. With vegetables, when they're boiled, they actually release a lot of their goodness into the water that usually just gets thrown away. It's just a nice little vitamin boost for them. If you use broccoli water, it does smell for a couple of days, but your plants love it. Rice and pasta are just brilliant at adding starch to the soil. Starch is something that your plants naturally produce and they use it as a source of energy for healthy growth. A brilliant natural little fertilizer.
Dust the leaves of your plants.
This one is so important. I know it might be obvious. Make sure you're dusting your plant's leaves regularly. Even if it's a low light plant, plants need light in order to photosynthesize. And if your plant is covered in dust, it's not going to be able to do that. This means that your plant won't be growing as quickly as maybe you'd like it to, and it's a lot more prone to certain types of pests as well. After you've given your leaves a really good dust, I always like to take a wet sponge or a wet piece of kitchen roll and just give them a good wipe, just to kind of get off any other dusty residue that may have collected on your leaves. But also, this is a really great opportunity to check for pests. Make sure you don't just do the top of the leaves, but you do underneath as well. And I tend to dust my plants' leaves probably about once a week and wipe them at least once a month, but it's definitely worth doing.
Mix coffee grounds into your soil.
Again, this tip is about naturally fertilising your soil. When you've had a pot of coffee, take the leftover coffee grounds that have been boiled through, wait for them to cool down, and mix them into your soil. This is fantastic at adding things like nitrogen, magnesium, phosphorus, loads of really good things to the soil. Most plants will appreciate this, but again, African violets love it. Jade plants, philodendrons, I never know how you say that. Philodendrons, they also really like it. And I've also heard that green tea can work really well for this as well.
Do half water changes when propagating.
I am going to make a video specifically about propagation at some point, but one thing I always get asked is, if you're using the water method for propagation, how often should you change that water? Should you change it at all? What I personally do, and I found it's worked so well, is I will just do half water changes. Fun fact, this is the same advice they give you if you've got a new goldfish. I only say this because the times that I've changed the water completely, I've often sent my plants into shock. They've either died or stopped growing. If you're leaving your plant in water for months on end, it's going to get a bit green and gross. I would personally recommend just doing half water changes at a time to keep the environment stable for your plants, but also making sure that the water doesn't go disgusting.
Find the right soil.
Again, this might be obvious, but don't cut corners with your soil. If you want your plants to do well, you need to be feeding it good stuff. And the nutrients it gets are mainly from the soil. I said in my last video the combination that I tend to use. I mix it up a little bit sometimes, but as a general rule of thumb, I tend to use houseplant soil, coconut core, I looked up how to say core, it is core, perlite and citrus soil. The blends that I use is probably about 40% houseplant soil and then 20% measures of core, perlite and citrus soil. I've played about with so many different types of soil mixes, and this is just one that I found works really well for me. So if you're not quite sure, then I would recommend this mix. For cacti and succulents, I use more or less the same, but I replace the houseplant soil with a specific succulent soil and add some extra sand or grit to help with drainage.
Make sure you turn your plants.
This next tip is turn your plants regularly. Again, your plants need an even amount of light all round in order to photosynthesize, even if they are low light plants. And if they're just getting that from one side, then their growth is going to be really uneven. They're going to just be like... On average, I would probably recommend turning them once a month, but if you notice they're starting to grow towards the light before then just give them a little spin.
Use hair to add nitrogen to the soil.
This is a bit of a weird one. In terms of adding nitrogen to the soil again, you can actually use hair to do this. It can be animal hair or human hair. If you take it out of your brush, obviously make sure that it's not full of like conditioner or oil or product or whatever. But you mix this into your soil, and as it decomposes, it releases nitrogen and gives your plants a boost. Plants that love nitrogen are Dieffenbachia, I don't know how you say it, dumcane, and philodendrons, I don't know which one is which, but both of them appreciate higher levels of nitrogen in the soil. I really hope these were useful. If they were, make sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Also, feel free to comment down below what you would like to see more of. I'll be sharing loads more tips and tricks on here soon, so stay tuned.